This is Everyday Wellness, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve your health and wellness goals and provide practical strategies that you can use in your real life. And now, here are your hosts, clinical health psychologist Dr. Kelly Donahue and nurse practitioner Cynthia Thurlow.
Good morning. We have Dr. Brian Lenzkes, who is an internal medicine doctor in San Diego, who has been focusing on clinical nutrition. He is also the co-host of Low Carb MD, which is one of our favorite podcasts that we listen to. He went to UC Irvine and received a BS in biology before attending USC Medical School, clearly a lifelong California man. After graduating in 1999, he started his residency program at Scripps in San Diego and extended his residency for an extra year as chief resident before starting his private practice career at Internal Medicine Associates in 2004. Dr. Lenzkes has been voted one of the top doctors in San Diego for 11 years. Even with gaining the respect of the medical community and his patients, he still felt a void as many patients with chronic conditions became more sick and required more medication. At the same time, he battled his own weight gain while following standard medical advice. After numerous hours of research, conferences, and implementation, he now loves to share his knowledge and personal experiences with you. He is currently down nearly 50 pounds after making some quote-unquote evidence-based lifestyle changes. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on your podcast. This is fun.
We're
we had so much
excited.
fun when we had you on. We appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. You're doing some great work over here.
Well, we'd like to start at the beginning, and I think your story is probably fairly compelling. So a very well-trained medical physician who was following all of the advice that he had learned and was gaining weight. So can you start there and tell us a little bit about that, what you were doing at the time, and then what happened that shifted what you were doing to really help you get to the place where you are today?
Well, it's going to be a typical story of Jason Fung. I think you probably have talked about him a lot also. And, so he was one of the guys who came along that really kind of started changing my views. I've struggled with weight my entire life, grew up overweight as a kid, never morbidly obese, but just overweight, and, played football, was the jock type guy. And then after college and med school and all that stuff, you eat all the time because you don't know when you're going to eat again. And, you study and eat and start gaining weight. So, during practice, I started reading the guidelines and said, okay, all I have to do is eat more frequently, 5 times a day and small meals, and I'll have green shakes for breakfast. So my wife was torturing me with green shakes and those kind of things in the morning. And then, being hungry at 10 and then snacking and then eating again at lunch. And so I just started gaining weight. I always worked out. I was working out, 6 days a week, and I'm gaining weight. And I think this is ridiculous. So one of my patients comes rolling in, and I looked at him. I thought, oh, he has cancer or something, because he had lost 40 pounds, and he's, in his late 60s, early 70s. And he said, no, I started doing this fast diet. And I said, oh, fast, that's not good. And, kind of had the typical response. You're going to go into starvation mode. Then I started thinking, well, he clearly didn't go into starvation mode. So what he was doing was basically this 5-2. He would eat 5 days a week, 2 days a week. He would fast, and he would eat 600 calories or less, no carbs. And I said, well, I'm trying to logically understand this, not as a doc, but just, physically go, okay, if you starve yourself on Tuesday, then Wednesday you must eat twice as much food. He said, no, that's the weird part. I'm not even hungry on Wednesday. I kind of force myself to eat. So, of course, I started going down this rabbit hole thinking, how in the heck is he fasting twice a week and losing weight? And metabolically, his numbers got better. Everything got better. And so I come across this guy, Jason Fung, and I started watching his YouTube videos, and I'm thinking, he's a legit doc. What's he selling? And then he wasn't selling anything. And, at the end of the interview, the guy asked him, hey, if fasting's so great, how come everyone's not doing it? He said, well, there's no money to be made. If there was money to be made, everyone would be doing it. He said, I'm not making this up. This has been going on for thousands of years. So then I started looking into the intermittent fasting. Then it got me into the low carb keto world, looking at data and kind of, as an internal medicine doc, our biggest nemesis is diabetes and metabolic disease. Makes sense. And once I started understanding that area of medicine, you think, wow, our diabetics come in, mostly are morbidly obese, and our type 2 diabetics, and they have super high insulin levels. I never checked insulin levels till Jason Fung started talking about it. So I realized this insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia, some people prefer to call it, is a major problem. And until we address that, we're going to have major metabolic effects from that. And so that's how I started going down that road. And I started losing, 15 or 20 pounds. And I wasn't really talking about it because, it wasn't the standard of care. And my patients started asking me, well, what are you doing, doc? I was like, well, I'm doing something. I'm cutting out processed foods. And so I started to really look at it and say, do I really need to have healthy whole wheat? Do I really need to have oatmeal for breakfast? Those kind of things. And that we've told people are healthy. And, and I don't want to mislead people. If you're thin, healthy, metabolically healthy, you can get away with it, nutritionally. But if you're 300 pounds and you're diabetic and your sugars are 300, you can't get away with it anymore because you have an oversupply of sugar. And the more sugar we put in the system, the more trouble you're going to have. And that's how I started down this road.
I think that's a really powerful message, especially with the conditioning that so many of us, not just Western medicine trained providers, but, what do we see on commercials? What do we see in the grocery store? It's a lot of processed carbs are what we are encouraged to consume on a daily basis. And it's no wonder that even the healthcare providers get snookered and fooled. And certainly when I was, a million years ago, when I was in nursing school, my nurse practitioner program, and, you're staying up really late and you're getting up really early and you're taking care of very sick people. And what are you doing? You're loading up on all those processed carbs. So it's not surprising that eventually it will catch up to us to some degree. But I love that we're starting to look at your patients and recognize that perhaps the strategy of using intermittent fasting was something that might be beneficial for you as well. And is that really kind of the impetus that got you really profoundly kind of focused and interested in advocating for that kind of lifestyle for your patients?
Well, I really started looking at it and I was having personal success. And then I went to Low Carb San Diego here. It was right next to my office. So I said, I'll just Uber over and go check it out and see if these people are nutty or what they're talking about. And then you have people like Georgia Ede there talking about from a psychiatry standpoint, people doing better. Then you have people from an oncology standpoint doing better. And you have people. So that's been when you start looking and saying, gosh, it's not just diabetes that we're managing. We're looking at dementia, if we can decrease our risk of dementia, and there's tons of data out there. And I was surprised after turning over different rocks of how many areas of medicine benefit from cutting out processed foods, and you look at our society and say, okay, do we all become lazy at the same time? What Jason says doesn't make any sense because a lot of us are more active than we've ever been. And I think that's the frustration for overweight people is people outside will look at them and say, well, you just have to exercise more and eat less. And that's what we keep telling them the same message. And it's kind of a joke I said on the podcast is like, if you're drowning in the ocean and someone says, just make more air than water and you'll be fine. It's hard to do when you're the one struggling, and right. It's so silly, but it's true. It's kind of you start saying, so many people said, they've told me the same advice over and over and they're frustrated. And that's why we love having guests on who've lost, 200 pounds, 300 pounds, reversed their diabetes, because everywhere they went, they said they got the same advice. And they said, well, I'm doing that, but it's not working for me. And so that's then been the big take home for us on the podcast is saying what works for you individually. If you gravitate towards being vegan, great. If you gravitate being more carnivore, great. If that's working for your body and your mood's great and your energy's great. So we're so individual. I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all at the end of the day where we say, okay, you could just do this for the rest of your life and you'll be fine. Or here's the step-by-step process. It's figuring out what works for you. And for me, I've been adjusting myself over my diet over time, saying, okay, let me try going more carnivore. Let me try, because I was eating a lot of nuts and cheese and I was gaining weight on a low carb diet and cutting out all the processed stuff. So I said, okay, that's it. New Year's, I'm giving that stuff up and I'm going to see where I go, I've lost weight over the holidays probably for the first time in my life,
That's amazing. But
getting sick didn't help either. It did help actually, but anyway.
But that one word that you mentioned that Kelly and I use all the time is bioindividuality, and how critical and important it is for recognizing that there's not a one size fits all philosophy as it pertains to food, because it's really about what works for you, what resonates, and that can change. Like you mentioned, nuts and cheese were becoming a struggle, and that's so common because they're delicious. But I think throughout our lifetime, it may be that maybe one year you're paleo and the next year you're keto, and maybe the following year you may be carnivore, really just listening to what, works best for you and your lifestyle for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing I've learned from a lot of the guests I've had on. Zach Bitter, who's a world-class runner. He's a long-distance runner, runs, he has the world record for 12 hours and 100-mile races and all this crazy stuff. But, I asked him what his diet is, and he said, depends on the day. You can see me one day you think I'm vegan, you see me one day you think I'm that, because he varies it based on what his body's needs are. And I think there's a lot of wisdom we had Ken Foley on, and he's a world-class bodybuilder type guy, physique competition guy. And his thing is, don't eat for winter, meaning a lot of the animals eat for winter, get fat, and then they eat differently in the spring, and so depending what food is available. And I think we're in a place where we get very confused, because if you look at the fruit that's in front of you, you're going to see that it's from Chile, it's from different countries, and it's shipped in. And so, it may be that there's some benefit of cycling in carbs and cycling out carbs as you get more fit. I think Tro has been doing that with his patients. He'll tell people to want a super high fat to start, and then take the fat out and add in more protein and change it based on their metabolic needs as time goes on. And he's having some great clinical success. And so I think we're going to learn. It's not, some people say, no, don't eat protein, eat too much. And it's so confusing. But I think for each of us, you have to say, okay, let me eat. And I've experimented a lot because it's fun for me. I like to see what happens to my cholesterol numbers because of, the effective diet. And it's kind of intriguing. I went on a pescatarian diet for a month, and my LDL went up 40 pounds, 40
I
points.
was listening to that podcast. I love it.
Yeah, but I lost 4 pounds in the process. So was it because I was in active weight loss? Because, no matter how you lose weight, when people are and that's what scares a lot of people, is when they're losing weight, that a lot of times the LDL is going to do crazy stuff, and the triglycerides may even bump initially, and then boom, they'll drop like crazy as you're using that as an energy source. So I think it's just, it really is interesting. I think we're going to learn a lot. Dave Feldman is doing some great research on this topic. And I think when we start realizing what is a healthy diet, because, what I would have said was a healthy diet 10 years ago, I'd say, well, it's probably not, So I think we have to be able to be open to that and change and change with what works for that patient in front of us. If they're doing a well-formulated ketogenic diet and you say, well, they're not losing weight, okay, let's change something. Maybe they're not responding. So it's not, I think if we have a one-size-fits-all for everyone, it's going to be very frustrating and unrewarding again, and I think the big thing we've learned is this low-fat diet for diabetics just doesn't work. If you start taking away all the fat and you put in carbohydrates to replace it, you're gonna really have trouble, because carbohydrates is their problem.
Yeah.
So some people are metabolically active and fit and healthy, and they can get away with a lot more carbs. I have patients who eat way more carbs than I would ever recommend, but they're eating a healthy form of carbs, and they're functioning well, and their triglycerides are great, and their HDL and everything else is good. So you have to look at that individual in front of you, and I think that's what we keep coming back to, is saying, hey, look, we may change it over time. It's not like I think our body is naturally designed for that, to survive with different inputs and outputs and all that. But the other thing that's huge that you bring up a lot, and I love, is looking at the stress, the anxiety, the comfort part of it. Because when we start talking about cereals, an image popped in my mind of Captain Crunch and all these fun cartoon memories that people have, and they want to go back to that, and they think, well, if I eat that, then I'll be happy again. And then they get really off kilt. You start getting sick and gaining weight and being miserable, and so it's hard because some of these things that we call comfort foods are really destroying us.
And I think some people have become so out of touch with their body because they're either punishing their body by trying to out exercise or eating foods that aren't good for them, or, as you mentioned, they're using food as a coping mechanism and aren't really in touch with what their body's saying. So I think that for this bioindividuality piece, it's really important and imperative to be in touch with what your body's telling you. But I'm curious, especially for those listeners who aren't as familiar with your work and your podcast, if you could just kind of give us a place for where you start when a client comes in. I'm guessing most of them have tried a number of diets and not had success. So where do you start with them? What do you recommend?
Well, I'm a little different. I'm a general internal medicine doc, so I take all patients. I'm not a weight loss specialist like Tro is, and that's not my my main focus. I'm basically a family doc for adults. But what I see a lot is people have struggled and they tried the low fat, and it hasn't worked for them, so they're frustrated. And people keep telling them, exercise more and eat less. The problem is when you exercise more, you get hungrier. And so when they're hungrier and they're not getting proper nutrition, they're gonna have binges. And I think the big thing, stepping back, and probably the biggest influence I've had is Rob Sivas. I don't know if you're familiar with. He's a bariatric surgeon in Florida. Very well trained guy, very smart guy. And so we started talking, and he said, "Well, Brian, carbs are an addiction." And basically, we were on a podcast just to give you insight. Well, we were talking to a patient who was considering gastric bypass, and Rob is a gastric bypass surgeon, and he's trying to talk the guy out of it. And he said, "Look, here's what you." So he comes down to this whole thing. He said, "Look, there's two foods you need to know. There's protein and there's fat." And then he starts talking, and I said, "Well, Rob, come back. There's protein, there's fat, there's carbohydrates." And he said, "No, that's a drug, not a food."
Wow, that's powerful.
What do you mean it's a drug, not a food? And so we got into this debate, and I was debating the other side of it. I go, well, it's kind of social. He said, Brian, why else would you go to an all-you-could-eat steakhouse and you stuff yourself, and the guy brings you another steak? What do you tell him? He said, I'm done. I don't want any more. But he said, instead of that, he brings you your favorite dessert, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Right? He said, why? He said, because you get that dopamine release. And we got into this discussion of addiction. Very interesting. And so that really changed my views a lot on this and I talk to all the time now about saying, look, it's not your fault necessarily. It's that carbs are addictive. It's just like, because we got into this whole discussion and Rob said, well, Brian, when's the last time you craved a cigarette? I said, well, never. And he said, once you could just quit after 20 years of smoking, what do you think it would be on your brain the whole time? And so he was making the point of, look, that's why thin people look at overweight people and they say, why do you eat like that? Because they're addicted. It's a difference. And now not everyone is addicted. Now, I don't want to make it a blanket term, but there is a huge amount of addiction in that. And it's become pretty clear to us because a lot of times people will say, man, I had a stressful day. What do I need? A glass of wine. I can't wake up this morning. I need a cup of coffee. So we realize how much food is influencing our mood and how much our mood influences our food. So in this whole low carb keto, and I'm telling you, I have this conversation daily now. As a matter of fact, just yesterday I had a discussion with a guy who's lost 50 pounds. And he said, I was starving all the time. All the time I was always hungry. And once he changed his diet over to a low carb diet, he said, I could go I eat once or twice a day and it's no big deal. And it's not stressful for me. Also yesterday I saw one of my patients who's a retired trauma surgeon. He's running, 50 miles a week and he eats once or twice a day and he's super, super fit and he's in his mid 70s and he looks like he's 40, he's an incredible physique. But he said, I used to be starving all the time when I was carb loading. Now I'm not hungry. And he said, I recover faster. So there's a lot of, we're seeing a lot of this. And I think the problem is once you're very deep into addiction, it's just like if you're drinking a gallon of vodka a night and if I say, okay, you're quitting today, that's it. Very stressful for people. But sometimes if they can cut down, say, okay, let's go down to half a bottle and, slowly taper down, but it's individual, right? So the point Rob was making, and this is why it's so powerful, was we got into this discussion about addiction and I said, why are you so hardcore about this addiction issue? And he said, well, because I'm a carb addict. He said, I lost 100 pounds doing low carb and keto, but I gained back 30 pounds 3 different times during my journey. Why? Because people say, you look great. Let's go out to dinner. And then I go out and have cookies and stuff at dinner. And then the next day I wake up and go, I'm going to have some cereal. Then I'll get back on it tomorrow. Then he says 30 days later, I wake up and I've gained 30 pounds, right?
Wow.
So we have to be mindful of that. And it's not that everyone's addicted, but, there's certain foods that are more addictive than others. In nature, these are things I've learned on the podcast too. In nature, you don't see fat and carbohydrate together very often. You see them in acorns and where they're trying to get fat for the winter, and you see it in breast milk, basically. And if you pick a bunch of other foods, you say, okay, steak, okay, that's going to be mostly fat, no carbohydrates. And so you don't see them joined together, but what we do with foods that are very addictive is we join those things together. Troy always brings up the point, if you have a potato and you have some olive oil and some salt, you're not going to eat very much of that raw potato with those things on it. But now you fry them up together and put salt on it and you can eat 12 potatoes worth, right? Yeah. Even if you look at a baked potato, if you have a steak and a baked potato, people would eat maybe half a baked potato or maybe the whole thing, possibly. But if they're in the form of French fries, they'll eat 6 potatoes worth without even thinking about it. So when you start looking at those combinations of food, and that's one thing Tro has talked about is hyperpalatability, is where food tastes really good, you're going to eat more of it, And so if you make it really, really desirable, we're going to binge more on that. So, it's one of those type of things. And it's a hard thing because there's part of the problem is that I've run into, and I actually got yelled at one time because I had a patient with fatty liver disease. The best treatment for fatty liver disease and binge eating disorder is carbohydrate restriction, because fatty liver is directly related to carbohydrate intake. So I recommended she cut back on her carbs. Her nutritionist called me and yelled at me the next day and said, how dare you tell her not to eat? And I said, why? And they said, well, you're going to make her binge by telling her she can't eat it. And I said, well, should I tell my alcoholics then to drink a glass of wine every day so they don't binge? because it's a problem when you have an addiction to something. Most of us don't have that, so it may not resonate with some people, but some people will realize once they have one, they tell you can't just have one chip, right? You're gonna eat the whole bag. So I think when we know that, we say, okay, that's my kryptonite. I got to stay away from it. So I think that's one thing is being able to understand yourself. Some people, I have friends who struggle with alcohol. They can have one drink and they don't drink again for a month, right? They have one glass and they're done. Others have one glass and they can't stop and they're going to be in the alley somewhere. So I think realizing that we're all not the same and tailoring it to yourself and knowing your weaknesses, like mine's chips and salsa. I got fat on that. So tortillas and all that kind of stuff, because I do a lot of volunteer work in Central America and things. So I just stay away from it. I don't go to the Mexican restaurant because I know if I go there, maybe I'll go there and have chips. The last 5 times I've gone, I haven't had any chips because I know that's just, I feel better when I'm not eating it. So I think it's just individualized. And I think what it really comes down to, you were asking about how we address the patients, like what's acceptable to you? Not everyone needs to have 6-pack abs and be the fitness model, but say, hey, look, let's try to get you off your hypertension medicines or your diabetes medicines. And we're having unbelievable success because all these things are kind of tied together. I think the big underlying force of all this is insulin resistance. When we could look at that, and I see people with really high insulin levels that are on multiple blood pressure medicines and diabetes meds, like, hey, if we can get that under control and allow your body to make enough insulin that where it's beneficial to you, then you don't need all this exogenous stuff anymore.
Correct. Right? And I think that, one of the things that I'm really hearing, and I know that Kelly and I are on the same page, is really meeting our patients where they are. We may have, an idealistic perspective of the direction they need to be going in, but really getting their buy-in to find out what's realistic for them. Like you mentioned, not everyone wants 6-pack abs. Not everyone wants to look like they, could be a bikini model, but they may desire to have a hold of their cravings. It could be as simple as that. Like I always say, when someone loses their desire to have these hyperpalatable foods, they almost feel like they have a monkey off their back. Like they can get up in the morning and their first thought isn't thinking about what are they going to eat that morning. It's what are the things I need to do for myself and my family or for my work. And then I'll think about food later. But, it's no longer their driving, presenting preoccupation. It is then something of food is fuel as opposed to food is an emotion or food is something that's tied up in a way that is, really adversely impacting their health and wellness for sure.
Yeah, absolutely true. I think that's it. I think, a lot of people that, it's an emotional, Dr. Unwin, who I respect a lot from England, who's done a lot of work in the low carb community. He said people would cry in his office when you say, okay, cut out bread and pasta, right? I mean, that's an emotion, especially if you're Italian, that's a really emotional thing. So trying to figure, what I find is a lot of people are figuring out how they can be culturally sensitive and still, be healthier, say, okay, do we need to put breadcrumbs in every item we make? Let's try and make it a different way. And so people are still having the foods they enjoy without being crazy about it. And I think, like I tell people always ask me, do you eat bread at all? I said, well, I don't ever eat like store-bought bread. I just don't. I don't see the nutritional value for me. I gain weight on it and I don't feel well, so I don't. But if I go to the nicest restaurant in the world or if I'm in Guatemala and someone hand makes me a tortilla, I'm not going to turn it down and be rude, right? So it's just saying, hey, is my happiness whether I have tortillas or not? I think it's at the moment. I think a lot of us we live in the moment. So instead of saying, okay, I just want to have tortillas today, maybe tomorrow type thing. And I think when you say you're never going to have one again, it's very stressful for people, And there's some things I say, look, if you're going to try cutting the low-hanging fruit, if you're drinking soda every day, get rid of that. That's a huge deal, right? Just doing that. So you don't have to be fanatical, but you could say, one of my friends lost 36 pounds in 6 weeks cutting out soda, right? That's it. That's all he did. Everything else was the same.
Hi all, it's Kelly. As you probably know, Cynthia and I love eating healthy. We are also busy moms and entrepreneurs who don't always have time to shop for the best ingredients. If, like us, you're trying to eat clean, but you don't necessarily have the time to go out shopping and deal with crowds and even search for the best organic foods, we have a solution for you. What if you could easily pick out the best ingredients online and have the meal delivered right to your door? You can with Sunbasket. Cynthia and I both rely on Sunbasket at various times when our life gets busy to help us provide good, high-quality meals for our family. With Sunbasket, you can cook healthy, delicious dinners with organic produce, premium ingredients, and delicious flavors that are delivered right to your door. All you have to do is choose your desired meal plan, and there are a lot of different meal plans to choose from, including the gluten-free plan, which Cynthia and I use regularly. You can customize it the way you want it, and you can have all the ingredients in your recipe ready to go. Sunbasket has organic produce, clean products, and they're a proud certified organic handler. So if you want to put your meal planning on autopilot to eat well all week, visit our link in the description to get started with Sunbasket today.
So you start realizing, man, I mean, the effects of that over the years, how much of an effect we can have just from cutting out, drinking tons of juice and soda. And I tell people it's more like, if there's certain things you really enjoy, say, okay, if I want to have a piece of dark chocolate at the end of the day, fine. But if you have dark chocolate at the end of the day after you've had bread and pizza and rice and all this other stuff together, it's like going to Walmart and all of a sudden it's a $300 bill. You're like, I didn't get anything. Yeah, you got this and this, all these things are for $8 and $2 and it all adds up over time.
When you went in for toothpaste. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that you're bringing up is the importance of small choices. One of my favorite books on this is Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he talks about trajectory and the power of making different choices every day will determine your trajectory. So just like you're saying, you can say yes to your favorite food one day, but no to 3 others. And by doing that, you're going to end up in a very different place than if you had said yes to all 4 of those foods every day.
Yeah. And I think just supporting yourself. And I think the big thing I've seen is when you have family support, when you get a family on board, man, it is powerful. We've had people on the podcast where, the whole family loses 800 pounds, because they're, the daughters get on board, the wife gets on board. We had Larry Diamond on, same thing. He started and his wife said, you're not going to stick to this. And he did. And then she ended up going on and losing tons of weight. But it's really that they're able to be more active now. And I think it's one of those things where we give obese people the misconception that they're just lazy. There's tons of people like Tro, when he was 350 pounds, this guy was not lazy. He was going through med school. He did a lot of stuff, residency. It's a lot of work. And to say that you're just morally weak, it's just that when you become hostage to this thing, just like there's a lot of smart people that are alcoholics and they, and then they say, well, they should know better. Well, addiction is different than knowing. It's an addiction. You can't help it. It's just like having fears that you just know are irrational fears, but you're afraid of spiders and you just can't help it, And so these physiologic responses. So that's kind of the thing I've been seeing is people will find once they get, like you said, they get free of this constantly being hungry. And then they say, wow, now I feel like going to exercise. I have more energy. My focus is better. My mood is better. And so there's a lot we don't understand. I think that's where the scientists, I think, miss out on understanding the low carb diet and a ketogenic diet, because there are benefits as far as if I'm a stress eater and I go on a diet that puts me in a place where I have lower stress levels, lower inflammation, I'm feeling better, I'm less likely to need that stress food, just like binging on alcohol, a lot of times it's because you go through a stressful period. You're going through a divorce, you lose your job, whatever, and then people turn to alcohol as their comfort. So I think the more we're learning, it's like, hey, why don't I find a different comfort rather than having it be food all the time? Because I know for myself, if I have a really stressful day, I'll say, oh gosh, I'm hungry, I want to eat something, right? That's just a natural response. So you say, okay, let me go for a walk with my wife. That relaxes me too. Let me go get a massage. Let me go work out, do whatever brings you that kind of joy where it doesn't have to be something that's going to be detrimental if you're struggling with your weight,
And I think it's also important to talk about the fact that, for many people, if they're feeling sad or stressed, a lot of the foods that they gravitate towards actually, what they're looking for is either a serotonin or a dopamine kind of boost. And so, it's this kind of short-term solution for what is ultimately, a long-term issue. And so I remind people what most of us crave when we're feeling stressed and anxious are, a lot of those processed carbs, which, sets up that same cycle and can be hugely problematic. But I love that you mentioned some of the healthier versions of when you're feeling stressed. You want to connect with your spouse, you want to exercise, you want to get out in nature, all things that we know are profoundly beneficial, even based on research.
Well, I think that's a huge point because really, when you look at it, people don't binge on broccoli and spinach.
Mm-hmm.
People don't say, "I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat spinach till I throw up tonight." People, I mean, this maybe someone out there says, "I love it and that's my thing," but for the most part, it's going to be the Pop Tarts and the Doritos and
Yeah.
and again, when you look at that. Tro brought that to my attention too. When you look at the most addictive foods, pizza, 50% fat, 50% carbs, hamburgers, fries, and a Coke, 50-50. So you start looking at all these ratios of this fat and sugar together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most palatable thing that, and it hits those neurotransmitters and makes us feel really good for a period of time. But then you crash afterwards, you feel miserable. So, that's one of those really important points is saying, look, if you have healthy food around you, if you don't have the chips around, you're not going to binge on it because you're not going to take off in the middle of the day and go to the store most likely. But, if it's around, it's just like, if you're struggling with alcohol, you don't have Jack Daniels in your refrigerator. Sooner or later, you're going to have a weak moment if you know that's your weakness.
Right.
So I think for a lot of us, we have to just realize ourselves and say, okay, I'm not going to put myself in that kind of environment. If you're out hiking with your friends, a lot different than being at the bar with your friends, right?
Yeah.
So I think you kind of figure out, okay, what's healthy for me and what works. But I think what happens a lot in this, the whole psychology of this, and a lot of people will say, well, I was there and there was nothing else to eat, so I had to eat pizza and I had to eat cake. And you could have prepared ahead of time and known that, And so I think a lot of us set ourselves up to self-destruct. I see it, and it's tragic for me because when you see diabetics who just binge on sugar like crazy, and then their numbers go crazy, and they get insulin resistant, then they need more insulin, and they gain weight because of the insulin, and once you're in that cycle, it's really, really hard to break it. And Dr. Unwin has done some work on that with, elevated triglycerides make you hungrier. Right. So the problem is the hungrier you get, the more triglycerides you tend to eat. The more triglycerides go up, then you're hungrier. Then you get into this whole cycle of it's an upward spiral where you need to break that cycle at some point.
Totally. And I think that it can be really helpful to explain to our clients that physiology trumps logical thought every time. So we will crave that sugar because it gives us that dopamine hit. We'll crave whatever that is, even though logically we know that that's not necessarily a healthy choice for us. But when we're in that stress response, we're feeling stressed, our focus narrows and we go toward what physiology is telling us to do.
Yeah, and once you do that, then you once you start eating the donuts, if you don't have control over it, you get into trouble. And that was kind of the big thing that I learned from Rob Seif is saying, hey, look, if you don't have control over something, you can't just say I'm going to have one drink if you can't control how much you're going to have. You can't just have one cookie if you can't control it. And I think that's why people who go on a carnivore approach, they're seeing a lot of mood benefits. They're seeing a lot of physiologic benefits, decreased inflammation, and they're feeling better. And when they're feeling better, they're less likely to binge, especially when you take that out as an option. Because the rest of it, because I don't know how over the years struggling with weight, I thought, I'll just walk by and there's a donut in there. I'll break off a little piece of it. I won't eat the whole thing. I'm just going to have a piece, right? Mm-hmm. Then an hour later, you walk by and go have another piece. Now it's like I look at it as not even an option. So it just takes that whole, like, do I just have one? Do I have half? Do I eat two cookies now? And when you start saying, okay, I can fast, when you start realizing, that's the thing that has been really fun for me is to really look at the physiology and say, you probably heard me yapping about this 24-hour glucose monitor I had, but it's really helpful to understand, when I'm not eating, my sugar actually trends up during the day. I don't get hypoglycemic and pass out and get weak and tired and all that stuff, because that's what we were always told, is that we'd run out of energy. But our body is designed that we can run on our fat stores. That's why we have fat stores, not for looks. It's for energy, for use your energy. It's really saying, look, all this stuff that you have in your bloodstream is bad. I got to get it out. Where's the safest place to put it? In the fat store. So it stores it there. So then you can break it back down later and use it when you need that energy source, when you're not. We've been in a problem of oversupply of energy. And that's why, I'm sure you saw this, the whole, Cynthia, I'm sure you saw the New England Journal of Medicine article talking about fasting, intermittent fasting, and what a benefit it is.
It's exciting. It's
really
exciting
super exciting that we're finally, they're starting to look. I mean, we've been doing that for thousands of years. Now all of a sudden we're saying it's a good idea. I mean, as a human species, we've done it. I mean, when I got sick over the weekend, first thing I didn't want to eat at all. I just wasn't hungry. So, Jason Fung has raised that point and said, well, maybe that's a coping mechanism. Your body is trying to funnel all the energy into the immune system and not waste time on digestion, all that stuff when you don't need it, because you have energy stores to burn. So we'll just pull that other extra energy out and use it as needed and use our resources more wisely. So I think we're going to learn a lot in that area too, because all these things kind of, it's interesting how they kind of just, it seems to me it's a natural progression for people, because once they're not starving all the time and they're running on a better fuel source, then all of a sudden they can fast without even, it's not that they're thinking about fasting initially, and then all of a sudden they say, oh yeah, I just skip lunch now, it's no big deal, or I just skip breakfast and I eat at lunchtime. And so they naturally go to a time restricted eating pattern, and they do better from that standpoint also. And so I think it's going to be individualized, and we all kind of figure out what works for us. I think that's the bottom line, what it really comes down to, and just making wise choices. And then once you get on that road, when you're not on constant starvation mode, survival mode, then you can just do better,
And I think that's really important. And I'm laughing because the doodles in my house have been quiet until a few minutes ago. So I've been muting my microphone as needed. I now have one in my office, so hopefully he will be quiet. And I love that you're kind of weaving into the conversation individuality, finding what works for you, finding what's feasible and reasonable. When it comes to low carb or keto, are there any people or any patients that you feel that it's not appropriate for? I know we get a lot of differing opinions.
Yeah, it's funny because I've always had these, you start looking at, thin people. Okay, why should they be keto? Well, I have a couple of women who are, that have rheumatoid arthritis. They went on a ketogenic diet and their rheumatoid arthritis got better, their inflammation got better, and all this stuff. Now they're trying to force themselves to eat enough so that their problem is they're losing weight and they want to gain weight. So, I think it really is going to come down to individuals. Again, Is there a benefit to being ketosis all the time? We don't know. We don't know long-term, what that means. I think a lot of people feel more peaceful. They feel like they're in a better mental state. And so, I don't know of anyone that cut out processed foods that all of a sudden became sick and weak and tired. And so if you're eating real food, I think that's what we come back to. Does it have to be ketogenic? No. Does it have to be low carb necessarily? No. I mean, if you're a super athlete and you're running, 50 miles a week, like my guy said, why don't you liberalize your carbs a little bit? And he said, well, because my recovery time's so much better when I'm low carb. I feel better. My energy, well, what am I going to do? Argue with him and say, no, you need to put on 10 pounds. And, he's working out, he's doing all of his activities. So I haven't come across anyone where a low carb diet, other than mentally, because that's their comfort, has been detrimental from that standpoint, cutting out processed foods. Yeah. Because most people, when they cut out processed foods, and I don't want to say it's universal, but it's pretty darn close to it, where I'll have, it's always, as a primary doc, it's very frustrating when people have chronic fatigue and they're just tired all the time. And it's like, well, gosh, how do you fix that? I mean, all your labs look normal, everything looks good. But then I started checking insulin levels, and a lot of these people will have high insulin levels even though they're thin, right? So they're eating a ton of carbohydrates and sugar, and you listen to them, and and one of my guys it really brought it to a head, because he goes, I'm just tired all the time. Are you? Well, the first thing we think of, are you depressed? Are you sleeping enough? Do you have sleep apnea? All these things. Right. And, I mean, no, none of those things are true. So I said, well, when's the last time you felt great? And he started laughing. He looked at me and shook his head. He goes, this is going to be weird. He said, the last time I felt great was the day before my colonoscopy. I had energy. I came home from work. I remember my wife was like, are you on something? You're so energetic and you're jumping around. And then I said, well, how about before that? And he said, I had to get a knee surgery. The day before the knee surgery, he said, I felt so good, my energy. And I was like, that's weird. And he goes, Doc, do you think sugar could have something to do with it? Because he eats sugar all the time. And those 2 days he was fasting. And when he was fasting, he felt great. His energy got better. So now he's Italian and owns an Italian restaurant. And so he's lost like 45 pounds. He's doing great. And his energy's through the roof, because he said, he was eating like gummy bears and all, because weight wasn't an issue for him. So it wasn't a problem. So I think a lot of times, and I've been fooled myself. I have a guy, he's 145 pounds that had full-blown type 2 diabetes with six-pack abs in his 70s. And I think it's weird. But I asked him his diet, and he goes, well, his A1C was high, but his diet was like, he would have pancakes and syrup, because he was a ranger. So you would go hiking for 6 hours a day. So he would carb load like crazy to go hike all day. And then he would take carbs with him because they were light and easy to carry. And then he would drink Mountain Dew. And then at night he'd go out for pizza and spaghetti and all that stuff, because he was burning off all those calories, but his pancreas still had to make insulin to get rid of that sugar. So the thing is, a lot of people are metabolically sick, even though they're not obese. And that's one thing we're learning. And that's very interesting, because, we always thought, well, as you get overweight, then you get diabetes. Now you got to go on a diet. You got to go to a low fat diet. And now we start realizing, it's a sugar overload that's been the problem. So you could be sugar overload, and especially in our Indian population, we see that a lot,
Yes.
where people get diabetes and they're not a fat person and they're not obese and they're getting diabetes, and it's shocking to us. But it's an energy. They don't have enough fat stores. Now, once you run out of fat stores, where do you put the extra sugar? Right? It has an overflow into your bloodstream, and that's type 2 diabetes. So some people, like we had Jeff on our podcast, he was 679 pounds, never got diabetes, because he had endless fat stores. So he could just keep storing it away. So instead of storing away, this guy was just hiking it away, right? He was burning off those calories, but he still needed metabolically to get rid of that sugar in his bloodstream. So, he ends up getting diabetes, and so we see it. I have 11 guys in my practice that are less than 150 pounds with type 2 diabetes, right?
Wow.
Type 2 diabetes. So they just were metabolically sick, but you just couldn't look at them and say they were metabolically sick. So, and there's other people who are overweight that are metabolically healthy, so it's very confusing for people.
I think that just drives home that point of bioindividuality and how different everyone is. Yeah. So even with that in mind, knowing that that's a theme for us and we all believe in that, if you had to give our listeners 2 tips to improve their health and wellness every day, what would those 2 tips be?
Gosh, I think one thing I would say for sure is being active, exercising. We have tons of data on that people with more muscle mass do better, less falls. I was just talking to the trauma surgeon. He was talking about, sarcopenia, which is lack of muscle tissue, being the biggest risk factor for them when they have a senior come in after a fall of death. So, being able to stay balanced and flexible and active and there's obviously benefits for mental health and all those kind of things. And I think number 2 would be that would be number 1. Number 2 would be, watching the processed foods, watching the the carbohydrates, processed food, empty calorie type stuff. And in that whole same setting is stress and sleep, very critical. If we're sleep deprived, we're going to be hungry more. I knew that in residency when I was up all night. The next day I would be starving all day. Yeah. And that was part of my weight gain was that, probably the stress of having, being very stressed at night, working hard and not sleeping. But a lot of people are sleep deprived, beat up, unhappy in their relationship, all those things, and their comfort is food. And so it's kind of one of those things. It's a cycle, and you go, okay, how do I break that cycle? Okay, let me be positive. Let me interact well with people. I think when people feel better about themselves, they don't need the other stuff as much, right? So my alcoholics who do volunteer work and are out in the community doing stuff, helping people, and they're investing in other people, they're less likely to binge on alcohol again. I think the same thing goes for us who are overweight. The worst thing for all those things is just downtime and not being happy, because you say, well, what will make me happy? Give me some cookies. Give me this. Give me that. So when you start realizing, hey, I'm investing in other people and I'm doing well and I'm helping other people, then you're less likely to go back to those bad habits. And I think really just being honest with yourself and understanding, okay, what are my triggers? What are my weaknesses? Personally for me, not what everyone else is doing. For me, do I feel terrible when I'm eating bread every day? Well, let me cut it out for a week or 2 and see. And I think being able to self-experiment and say, okay, let me try something and see if it's working. If not, I'll change tacks. Maybe I'll fast more often. Maybe I'll fast less often. Because I think, Kelly, you raised that point, is some people are they want to have results right now. So they work out super hard today and then they don't work out for a week because they're sore and they're beat up, and then they get out of it. So they'd be better off just saying, look, let me slowly just ease into this thing and start exercising a little bit more, making it a habit more so than torturing myself, a penance type thing that I have to pay for my past sins. Now I have to work out for 12 hours today, and so I think all those things, having life balance really comes back into play, and being happy and social and investing in people and just kind of thinking outside of yourself all the time and not living for the moment exactly. I mean, enjoying the moment, but not saying, everyone else is eating cookies, so I'm going to eat cookies, even though I'm struggling with weight and diabetes and all that kind of stuff. I want to be part of the crowd. But, I think it's so, for people who get it, it becomes very easy, especially when they're feeling well, because we all want to, really the bottom line when it comes down to it, there's nothing more important than your health, right? There's really nothing more important than your health and being able to go out with your kids and play with your dogs and go and do stuff. But when you feel miserable, and it's just such an effort, it's just so hard. But once you start feeling better, you're more likely to want to do those things, And so I think it's a natural progression that happens for people.
Well, we can't thank you again for carving time out of your busy schedule. I know, especially after the holidays, we wanted to kind of start our podcast recordings off right and on the right foot. And to have you here with us today really means a lot. So thank you so much. I know our listeners are going to love this episode.
No, I'm honored to join you. Thank you so much for having me. And I love what you're doing. And I love that we're all kind of taking our different tacks. And I see you're tackling some really important topics. And so, I think we all, and I think that's part of it, is we all kind of learn from each other. Well, I'm going to take a nugget from you. You'll take one from me, and we all kind of learn, say, I like that perspective. And so that's what's been great is over the last year or so, I've really changed my views on a lot of things and had a lot more understanding based on what the experts like yourself, from the psychological standpoint, from, being a nurse practitioner, working with so many people and understanding intermittent fasting. And over time, we're going to say, hey, here's a model that works for 80% of people. Why don't we try that? And then we'll deviate from that model. But, I think we're all on that quest to help our patients and to learn. And it's fun. So I'm very honored to be here and I'm appreciative of you having me on.
Thank you so much.
Here's to 2020, right?
Sounds great.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Wellness. If you loved this episode, please leave us a rating and review, subscribe, and remember, tell a friend. And if you want to connect with us online, visit the link in the show notes.